More moves are coming as following. A very interesting trade that Brad Living pulled off last night. New reports have dropped revealing that Brad Living isn't done and more moves are imminent. We're going to break down these new reports and discuss what this means going forward as something huge is brewing surrounding the Leafs following yet another trade that Living has pulled off. But before we get into it all, if you're part of the percentage or aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys again for your continued support over here as we're on the road to the big goal of 25,000 subscribers. And of course, the huge goal of 30,000. You guys have an absolute beast. There's a lot to go over today. Last night, of course, the Leafs pulled off their first interesting trade in the past few days, at least. Of course, they made the Michelli trade. Now they made the Ryan Reeves trade. And following that trade, some new reports have dropped revealing that more moves are coming. But let's start with this here. And you can see, following the Reeves trade, the Leafs now have $5.3 million in cap space. What comes next? And of course, that has made the conversation fully focused on what's next for the Leafs. The Reeves trade, we've had some time to marinate about it. We'll dive into it a bit more in a little bit. Very good move. And I think everyone kind of agrees with that. But Darius, you look back to what David Pagnotta has said in a new report here, in a recent report. David Pagnotta said that you can see here the Leafs are currently shopping David Kampf, Jarnkrok, Nick Robertson, and Ryan Reeves. Ryan Reeves now has been traded, and they are still shopping Kampf, Jarnkrok, and Robertson. More moves are to come. We know they're obviously trying to get Jack Roslovic as well, but David Pagnotta was right on the money here, talking about how Ryan Reeves was on the block, and now, according to multiple reports, David Pagnotta, Chris Johnson from a few days ago as well, they're trying to move on from David Kampf and specifically Calle Jarnkrok as well.
Yeah, because they're trying to make a big splash. It's no secret at this point. I'm not entirely thrilled that Brad Treliving basically came out and announced that he's looking to acquire a top six forward, because it might make it a little bit harder for the Leafs to acquire a top six forward when you announce things like that. But nonetheless, we're going to have another video as well on the Ryan Reeves trade and kind of the fallout from it, and that it does actually kind of signal that things are changing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm actually very excited about that, but we'll do that in another video. But Calle Jarnkrok and David Kampf, they don't really have spots on this team. Brad Treliving has never named any of them, or either of them, I should say, when talking about the team moving forward. And when you look at the center depth, they don't really fit in. And, Brad Treliving even came out and said that Scott Laughton could be the fourth line center, right? So there's no room for David Kampf on this team, especially making $2.5 million. So we know that these are the next moves. It's Calle Jarnkrok, it's David Kampf. We don't know how difficult at this point in time behind the scenes it is to try and move these guys, but the fact that you got a pretty useful defenseman for Ryan Reeves, and no disrespect to Ryan Reeves, but the game is getting faster, and what he brings to a lineup is kind of getting phased out, even though he is a skilled player and he's in the NHL, right? But nonetheless, I do think that they are obviously trying to move out both of these players. I'm sure they're going to get something for them. They're trying to figure that out. And then once they do that, they will have enough salary cap space to go out and get a big fish if they want to, which I think is the goal, because I don't think that, we've been talking about a lot of players. I don't think Tyler Bertuzzi is the answer or anything like that at this point in time. I think they want to go out, make a big splash in terms of a trade, and acquire somebody who probably is going to end up making a lot of money. And that's why they're trying to free up as much space as possible to leave themselves with some flexibility as well.
Yeah, and obviously Robertson reportedly is going to be staying with the Leafs for now. Again, that can change. The guy they got back, very, very solid player, as we covered in the video yesterday. But I mean, a 6'2", 24-year-old defenseman. I mean, maybe they end up moving on from a defenseman and then putting Henry Throne right into the fire. I doubt that's going to be the case, but it is a possibility for that. But the interesting point now is about the value of Kampf for Jarnkrok. If you can land Henry Throne for a 38-year-old Ryan Reeves, you can easily fetch a third or fourth rounder for David Kampf and or Calle Jarnkrok, especially with their bonuses, which have now been paid here in early July. And this becomes the question now. I don't know if they're going to get a third round pick for either of these guys, but it does beg the question. The Ryan Reeves trade, it kind of sets the value for, you're able to get a young defenseman. Does David Kampf and, of course, Calle Jarnkrok have as much value as Ryan Reeves? I guess that's the big question mark. If you can get a player with similar value to Henry Throne for either of those guys, I think Brad Treliving would be over the moon, especially when it doesn't make sense, especially with the acquisition of Michael Pezzetta, who's seemingly going to play a fair bit, to have David Kampf and Jarnkrok on $4.5 million per year when, of course, Lorentz and McMahon are making 2.7. It seems like, according to all these reports, their time in Toronto is going to come to an end, and it makes sense because they have a few players now that they can move off of. Of course, there are some 10-team no-trade clauses in there. I'm sure that wouldn't really cause too much of a problem, but all four of these guys can, and of course, this tweet was made before the Ryan Reeves trade, which now he's officially gone. Jarnkrok, David Kampf, Domi, Riley, they're definitely going to be trying to move those guys, especially with the fact that the Ryan Reeves trade kind of came out of nowhere, and we know they're actively shopping at least those two, and then, of course, Domi and Riley's up in the air.
I wanted to bring this up specifically because, Max Domi, when you look at the no movement clause for Riley, kind of makes sense. I know hindsight 2020 and all that, but for Domi, it also kind of makes sense to have at least a 13 team no trade list. I've been very complimentary of Brad Living on the channel. I like a lot of the moves he makes. How does David Kampf and Kalle Jarnkrok end up with a 10 team no trade list? That is insane to me that those guys end up with that in their contract. That makes it, I guess, a little bit more difficult to trade them because obviously you can't trade them wherever. But I'm looking at teams across the league like the Pittsburgh Penguins, for example, that can take on a lot of salary cap that don't have a very good team. And you don't want a Kalle Jarnkrok for even like a fifth or a sixth or something. I think the Leafs are just trying to cap dump at this point. They don't want much in return, right? Just something, a asset back in return, even if it is a fifth or sixth round pick, just get rid of the salary cap space. So then you can bring in a top line winger because we've seen the model. It's more so like the Florida Panthers, right? They're trying to bring in guys like Pizzetta and a couple other guys on, league minimum deals to fill in the rest of the lineup. Obviously, Lorentz, has more use. He can play in different situations and actually chip in here and there. He scored some big goals for this team during the regular season, but they're trying to move these guys out. And I'm looking at teams like Pittsburgh, other teams around the league, even San Jose that they just made a trade with for Ryan Reeves, like trying to get to the floor and all of that. You can't use some of these guys just to plug it into your lineup and we'll take like anything back in return, not salary, right? So I think it's pretty interesting. And these are definitely the next moves. And I'm, a little surprised that they haven't already happened because it's so obvious that these are the next moves to then go into August, try and make a trade for a top line winger.
Yeah, and obviously Kalle Jarnkrok makes 2.1, David Kampf 2.4, and there's been some interesting rumblings around. I want to throw this one out there. It was a recent article that dropped linking surprisingly the Washington Capitals to Kalle Jarnkrok here, and their reasoning is the Capitals currently have $4.12 million in cap space that could look to add a depth forward. So I mean, it makes some sense for a team like the Capitals, like any team that has cap space. Like he's an NHL caliber player in spurts, and obviously, I don't know if he's good to play 82 games for the Capitals, but maybe the Capitals want some more forward depth. That would make some sense. I don't think Brad Living would ask for a lot, so a team to keep an eye on there, especially given the fact that I think Kalle Jarnkrok at 2.1 million is pretty expensive, but it's also not completely unreasonable with the cap going up and all those things. He is on the last year of his deal. David Kampf, on the other hand. I mean, you could argue that Kampf has more like value on the ice if they both were on the same number. But again, Kampf has another year left on his deal at 30 years old. So it's going to be very interesting. You look how it factors in. This is assuming they keep, both of those guys. You have Nyes, Matthews, Nylander. I mean, the top six is going to be locked in. And then you have Nicholas Swan, Bobby McMahon. The Jarnkrok, Kampf, those are the two guys that you have open spots for. And of course, this has no Michael Pizzetta. I'd assume they'd rather even probably play Michael Pizzetta over a guy like Kalle Jarnkrok based on what we saw last year. But it's going to be interesting because they need to make a move here pretty soon to open up some more things. And they're going to, of course, make a trade for a top six here in the next, we would assume, month or two.
Yeah, the thing for me with Pizzetta, he's not pictured here. And again, I don't think Jarnkrok and Kampf are going to make it to camp. I would be very surprised if they did. But to me, like Kalle Jarnkrok is pretty good at a lot of things, right? He can chip in for goals here and there. He can set up some goals. Pretty good skater. Not that great physically.
Yeah.
Defensively, he's okay, right? A decent two-way player. So he's pretty good at a lot of things, right? He's not elite at anything. Pizzetta, you know exactly what you're getting with him, and you paid league minimum for it, right? So I feel like that's why they'd rather a guy like that in the lineup. You have guys that have like all these tools right now, and that's great, but they're not doing anything specific with it, I guess. So in Pizzetta, you know exactly what he brings to the lineup, and you're just trying to free up salary cap space at this point. Jarnkrok, can he offer something like the Washington Capitals, for example, you brought up? They just let go of Taylor Radish. He just signed with the New York Rangers, right? So maybe they would want to add another right shot there on the third line, maybe the fourth line or something like that. It's a depth piece. I don't think Jarnkrok is going to play every game. Like you mentioned, he had that injury last year. He looked okay, but he doesn't do much. He doesn't produce in the playoffs, none of these things, right? So it is time for the Leafs to move on and, just take anything at this point. Free up that cap space, go out, get your top line wing, have some flexibility still so you can add some guys and rely on the Marlies too, because that's something that other teams are able to do in the league. The Leafs haven't been able to do that for a long time. So rely on the Marlies as well.
Yeah, let us know below your thoughts are on the Capitals, as well as which of these two players, or even the four, Morgan Rielly, Domi, Jarnkrok, and Kampf, do you want to see let go next in a trade? Thank you guys for watching. See you later.